We're back at the Moto Guzzi Museum in Mandello del Lario. In the first video of this mini-series, I focused on the race bikes and record breakers. In this video, we're looking at some of the vintage road bikes built between 1919 and 1966. From early prototypes and touring machines, through popular pre-war singles and post-war commuters, to the last big single used by the police. We'll start right at the beginning with this prototype that set the template for Moto Guzzi's first production bike. This bike sits in a glass case for a good reason. It's the 1919 GP500, the prototype built before Moto Guzzi was even officially founded. The GP was created by Carlo Guzzi, Giorgio Parodi and Giovanni Ravelli, and it already used a very distinctive layout. A horizontal 500cc single with an external flywheel, 3-speed gearbox and a rear band brake that predates the drum brakes we're used to seeing. For its time, the engine was surprisingly advanced, with overhead valves and a very tidy, compact design. The GP never went into production, but it set the pattern for the bikes that followed, especially the first model that customers could actually buy. This is the 1921-24 Normale 500, Moto Guzzi's first production model. It keeps that familiar horizontal single layout with the external flywheel, but in a more practical, simplified form. We still have a 3-speed gearbox, a hardtail rear frame and a girder front fork, with a simple tubular spring at the top to provide some suspension. Despite its name, the Normale was anything but ordinary for the early 1920s. It quickly became a commercial success and established a basic Moto Guzzi look that would carry through the 1920s and 30s. A long, low single, external flywheel and that distinctive engine sitting almost flat in the frame. From here, Moto Guzzi started to branch out into more specialized roles, including long-distance touring. This handsome machine is the 1928-30 GT Norge 500, one of the most important early Moto Guzzis. It was designed as a long-distance touring bike, and it introduced something quite special for the time: rear suspension. While many bikes of the late 1920s were still rigid at the back, the Norge used a clever system with a progressive elastic frame, making long days in the saddle much more bearable. You can also see leg guards, a tank-mounted handshift for the 3-speed gearbox, and adjustable front and rear suspension. To prove the bike's capability, Carlo Guzzi's brother, Giuseppe, rode a GT500 from Mandello del Lario all the way to Lapland and the Arctic Circle in 1928. The model was later named Norge in honor of that journey. It's a very early example of an adventure touring Moto Guzzi, long before that term existed. By the early 1930s, Moto Guzzi were pushing further into performance with bikes like this 1931-34 2VT 500. The 2VT introduced overhead valves on the 500 single, moving away from the earlier valve arrangements and giving better breathing and more performance. The basic chassis is familiar: rigid rear end, girder forks with adjustable springs, and a handshift gearbox, but the engine and styling are clearly a step forward. You can think of the 2VT as a bridge between Guzzi's sturdy touring machines and the more sporting models that followed, both on the road and on the track. Alongside the 2VT, Moto Guzzi produced the Sport 15 500, seen here in its classic red livery. The Sport 15 became one of Moto Guzzi's best-selling pre-war models, with nearly 6,000 built between 1931 and 1939. It kept the tried and tested formula of a 500cc single, rigid rear frame and girder forks with adjustable springing, but wrapped in styling that was modern and attractive for the time. If the GP and the Normale are the brand's beginnings, the Sport 15 is very much the pre-war people's Guzzi, the bike that many everyday riders actually owned. By the end of the 1930s, Moto Guzzi was also developing smaller capacity machines like this 1939 to 1940 Airone 250. The Airone uses a tubular frame and a 250cc overhead valve single, with a 4-speed foot change gearbox and proper suspension at both ends. With its chromed fuel tank and exposed flywheel, it looks like a scaled down Falcone, and that resemblance wasn't accidental. The Airone went on to become one of Italy's best-selling medium-capacity motorcycles for many years. It was affordable to run, practical for daily use, and still had enough performance and style to feel special. Sitting nearby is something much more unusual, the 1939 Cicogna 500. Based on Moto Guzzi's robust 500 single, this bike was adapted for use in snow, with built-in skis at the front and a partially raised exhaust. It still has girder forks with adjustable springing and rear suspension, but the overall setup is clearly aimed at coping with harsh winter conditions. It's believed that machines like this were developed for use by the Finnish army in the build-up to the Winter War. Whatever the exact details, it shows Moto Guzzi taking their familiar 500cc single and turning it into a very specialized snow-going motorcycle. Seeing the bike here alongside period photographs of it in the snow really brings that experiment to life. After the war, Moto Guzzi picked up where they'd left off, revising their big singles for a new era. This is the 1947 GTV 500, a post-war evolution of their 500cc road bikes. It uses an overhead valve engine with a 4-speed foot change gearbox and features like leg guards, adjustable rear suspension, and a distinctive fishtail exhaust. The GTV and its close relatives would go on to form the basis for later models like the Astore and the Falcone, and bikes like this saw widespread use with both civilians and official services. It's a solid, dependable tourer from the late 1940s. For everyday urban use, Moto Guzzi took a very different approach with the Galetto. Here we have the earlier Galetto 175 and the later Galetto 192, built between the early 1950s and the mid-1960s. The idea was to combine the practicality of a scooter with the stability of a motorcycle. The Galetto uses a step-through frame with leg guards and enclosed bodywork, but with larger wheels than a typical scooter, which improves stability on rougher roads. The 175cc version has a solo saddle for the rider and a small pad for a pillion, while the later 192cc model drops the pillion pad in favour of a luggage rack and adds a very clever detail, a full spare wheel mounted in front of the leg guards. It's often cited as one of Moto Guzzi's most popular models, and it shows how the company tried to solve practical problems of everyday transport with a bit of ingenuity. Moving towards the end of the 1950s, we come to the 1959 Lodola GT235. The Lodola was the last project overseen by Carlo Guzzi himself. It started life as a smaller capacity overhead cam single and was later enlarged to 235cc and simplified to a pushrod design for this Gran Turismo version. Stylistically, it feels much more modern than the earlier bikes we've seen. Telescopic forks, rear suspension, and a proper double saddle. It's a neat example of Moto Guzzi transitioning from the classic 1930s look towards the machines of the 1960s. Alongside the Lodola, Moto Guzzi were also building small commuters like this 1960-66 Zigolo 110. The Zigolo line started as a cheap, simple commuter, and by the time of the 110, it had gained a slightly larger two-stroke engine and proper hydraulic rear suspension. The shiny red bodywork almost completely encloses the frame and much of the engine, giving it a clean, stylish look. This was aimed squarely at urban riders. something you could ride to work in normal clothes with the added comfort of better suspension and a bit of weather protection, at a price many people could afford. To round out this look at Moto Guzzi's vintage road bikes, we come back to the big singles with the 1953 Falcone Sport 500. The Falcone line is one of Moto Guzzi's most iconic families. Robust 500cc singles with that unmistakable external flywheel on the side of the engine. The sport version shown here is the more performance-oriented model, with a 4-speed foot-change gearbox, adjustable suspension front and rear, and a classic fishtail exhaust. Falcones were used widely by civilians, the military, and the police, and they represent the peak of Moto Guzzi's horizontal big single era. Finally, we have this 1966 Falcone Nuovo Tourist Police bike. Mechanically, it's an updated big single with an overhead valve 500, 4-speed gearbox and telescopic forks, but here it's equipped for official duty. The bike wears an olive green finish with rigid leg guards, adjustable rear suspension and a large windscreen with canvas flaps to help protect the rider's legs from the weather. Machines like this were widely used by Italian police forces, and they marked the end of the road for the big single Moto Guzzi in frontline service. Later police bikes would switch to twin-cylinder V7s and other more modern machines. From the 1919 GP prototype in its glass case to the Falcone police bike of the 1960s, these vintage road machines show how Moto Guzzi evolved from simple 500 singles to touring bikes, best-selling 250s, clever scooter motorcycle hybrids, and practical commuters. In this video, we've focused on the road bikes from 1919 to 1966. In the next part of this Moto Guzzi Museum series, I'll be taking a closer look at the later road bikes, the big V-twin Tourers, and the full line of police motorcycles that followed on from this Falcone Nuovo. If you've enjoyed this look at the vintage Moto Guzzi road bikes, please consider liking the video, subscribing to the channel, and letting me know in the comments which of these bikes you'd most like to ride or own. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.